So welcome to the 23rd of July Aries-vcx community call, or in George's case, the 24th. Want to note that this is a Hyperledger Linux Foundation call, so note the antitrust policy and the code of conduct. So make sure we're following those and treating each other with respect. In terms of announcements, we've released 0.65 of Aries-vcx, which is very exciting. This has a bunch of things, and want to give a lot of props to George for the work in this one. It includes updates for Data Exchange 1.1, a lot of work on getting the Aries agent test harness back channel to the point where we want it to be. Work on mobile and updating Rust 1.79. So lots of good stuff in that. I think puts us in a good place for the work we're working on now. Related to that, I'm leaving this here in that just so that if anybody pops in and sees this, I want to make sure people are aware that we're planning to drop the support of Indie SDK and that we are planning on 0.65 being the last release that is supporting the Indie SDK. In terms of work done, there's a lot here. A lot of this was already covered within the actual release details, so not going to go line item by line item here. But do you guys want to call out anything specific announcement-wise or overview of work or anything related to other projects here?
No, not really. I'm good. My PRs were just basically some small adjustments, but ultimately, I think overall, lots of that stuff will be overridden once we implement some of the new stuff.
Yep.
Yeah, no, not much for me. Just sort of housekeeping stuff with the dependencies and Rust version and fixing up some AATH issues. Yeah.
Yep. I guess the only thing I'll mention here is the announcement from the I forget what it's called. The Aries the Linux Foundation is splitting off the creating the. I should wait till I find this before I try and speak
Oh
to
yeah,
what I'm saying.
like the decentralized foundation or something like that, right?
Yeah.
Decentralized trust.
Yeah.
Yes, decentralized trust, and that impacts Aries, and that will actually be a separate project underneath that. And that will be having a technical steering committee, and we'll have this scope defined of what the scope of Aries is. And so I don't think that'll actually impact too much of our work here, but will something to be aware of, I guess. So that's why I bring it up.
Cool.
Question
Does
here.
that mean,
Sorry.
sorry,
No,
you
just
go ahead.
asking, do we know why they're moving this into this new organization? It seems pretty the same to me, but I haven't been keeping a tab on it.
As I understand it, and I'm not, I will fully admit that I'm not necessarily the best to speak to it, but from my understanding is it's essentially providing additional focus and resources towards being able to specifically around decentralized trust. So it is further focusing beyond what Hyperledger was chartered to do, if that makes sense.
Yeah, I see what you mean. Okay.
Will our repos get moved at all? Do you know? Like we're under the Hyperledger group right now.
I have no idea. Well, actually, I do believe, I think that if I recall, there is provisions for we're able to keep. I may be incorrect, but if I remember correctly, we're able to keep our branding as Hyperledger, like Hyperledger Aries, for instance. So in that case, it may not move. It's possible that we will create a separate GitHub organization for Aries specifically. In that case, I would expect them to move then. So there's a lot of question marks there that have not yet been answered. And that's a very good one. So if I get a better answer than the one I just gave you, I'll let you know, George.
Yeah, no, all good. And thanks for keeping tabs on this. Pretty
Yeah.
important that we know about it.
Yep. Awesome. In terms of agenda today, Alberto wanted to talk to some of the iOS dependencies and stuff. We've been talking about that a bunch in Discord, but more discussion here could be really good, I think. I thought it would be good to give a look at what I've been doing on some of the Aries Framework VCX standpoint. It's still in the pretty early stages, but I figure pretty early in the early stages is a good point for potentially input from you, George. I've already shown some of this off to Alberto, um, so getting input here I think would be really good. So want to at least look at that a little bit today. Were there any other things that we want to put on the agenda here at the beginning?
Not really from me. Just I'll call out that there's a grad at Anonymy who's keen to work on some VCX stuff on the side, so we might get a few more contributions from other people,
Awesome.
which will be good.
That'd be really
Nice.
good. Do
Yeah.
you think, are they looking for, would they end up looking for direction in terms of what would be good to work on, or is it going to be specifically features and stuff that Anonymy is looking for?
It's just sort of bits and pieces. Like I've pointed a couple of the AATH related issues to him at the moment, and he's looking at them, and yeah, I'll
Okay,
coordinate with him to help him through it if he needs it.
sweet,
But yeah, it'll be general stuff rather than anonymity specific.
cool. It's really good to hear. I love getting additional contributors in WANA. It helps, especially if the more people that you get viewing code, the more often you can get. One, you have to reach consensus, which can be a thing, but it does improve the quality of the code, in my opinion.
Yep, definitely.
Awesome. I guess then let's talk about the iOS dependencies. Alberto, you wanna kick off that discussion?
Yeah. So there's like I guess there's a few gaps in my knowledge when it comes to this because this really gets into the deep weeds of the libraries here. So as I mentioned on Discord, no issues with downloading, unzipping, and adding those dependencies for Android, right?
Yeah.
So for iOS, that's where I started having some trouble. Got into what libsodium is, that message library, the OpenSSL. So I guess I'm just trying to like sort of understand. So these three libraries that work on Android, right? These like supposed to be like those are from the old legacy project when Indie was all bundled up together. But now that it's separate, now we have an Anon-Creds, NDVDR, and ASCAR. I'm just trying to pinpoint how they move those libraries into, right? So I'm trying to figure out what's the best way to do that or where I can find it. Like I said, I mentioned briefly there that I was able to find these build-universal.sh that basically bundle an ASCAR, Aries ASCAR.a, NDVDR.a, and OnCreds.a. Then James, you mentioned something about the Anon-Creds CLL signatures. Which that's where I get a little bit lost. From what I can understand, it's like an add-on to AnonCreds, or it's the algorithm, the crypto part of AnonCreds,
Yeah,
but I'm not sure. Oh, okay, got it.
that's according to my understanding. Yeah.
Yeah, so I'm trying to see like what this unified wrappers project is going to need, right?
Yep.
Because now it's a bit different. But then that also poses a question, like, do I have the Android part wrong as well, right? So I guess first I just want to get the basics done here and just get an iOS project. I've already created a new project, separated into folders, and we're just trying to make it run. I'm also working with the rest of the team who are still ramping up on lots of the stuff with Unify and Rust. So I just kind of wanted to get you guys' thoughts. I know you guys added your comments in that thread, but just wanted to see what you guys thought. What's my best approach, in your opinion, into kind of finding the libraries? I mean, um, I'm searching through some of the repos and trying to see how other pipelines are doing, grabbing those if you even have those, right? But there's still a lot of stuff I haven't found yet.
Yep. Uh, I think I have two thoughts, and then I'll let George jump in with his amazing expertise. I think one of the things that I think is useful to point out so I may be wrong. From my understanding, the reason why these are being vendored is that one of the problems you'll have in libraries is that you'll want to use if you have two dependencies that both rely on the same library, but they're both packaging it and they're using different versions, you can have some really problematic things with that. So by doing it as vendored, you allow the higher level dependency. So in this case, us, Aries-vcx, to determine which version is going to be used. Uh, that's my rough understanding of why you would want a vendor in this case.
What do you mean by vendored?
So if we go to I'm going to go to IndieVDR because I know that one's vendored off the top of my head.
Yeah, I did see some of that in some of the cargo files.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So and that's the wrong one to look at. Uh, from my understanding, this is indicating that this needs to be uh, the actual library needs to be um, provided outside of cargo. George, do you have do you have a better explanation than I do for what vendor means in this context?
Um, okay, we need to find this out because I thought it meant the opposite. I thought it meant when you turn on this vendored flag, then when you build the dependency, in this case ZMQ, ZMQ will build it and embed the necessary binary that you need. So for your particular architecture into the Rust build, so that then as a consumer, you don't need to worry about trying to link it outside. That's what I thought it meant.
That would make sense to me. The part that doesn't make sense is why we have to also still include ZMQ outside of the dependency, if that makes sense.
Um, do we?
From my knowledge, yes, and that the experience when I've been working on the where I'm most experienced working on React Native projects, if we don't properly get the ZMQ set up in the like the JNI libraries, for instance, on Android, it will not work.
Mhm.
But that was in the more classic Indie SDK case. It might be possible that, but I want to say Indie SDK also vendored ZMQ.
Right. Hmm.
This is not what I wanted.
Um, okay, I suppose we need confirmation on what vendor is meant to mean first, and then maybe whether ZMQ is doing it correctly. Um,
Oh, yeah. ZMQ is not vendored in this case.
Right, so maybe that was why it wasn't, you needed to link it outside. Hmm.
Yeah. And specifically, I think that this is essentially indicating that we would be depending on these uh, assets, depending on which variant you're doing. At least for these architectures, there might be other pieces here. So theoretically, what this would mean, if we have our understanding of vendored correctly, is that we wouldn't need to manually be linking the .so files of the libzmq and libssl
Hmm.
anymore because they're vendored theoretically.
Yeah, I think so. Yeah.
So I guess one of my questions, Alberto, is have you tried doing it without linking the libraries with either iOS or Android, I guess?
Mm, probably I'm still a little bit confused. So when you say linking, in this Cargo Tomo, uh, do you mean like in the like in I saw it there in the feature, or maybe you can help me understand a little bit more what you mean by linking.
Yeah. Um, that's not where I wanted to go. Uh, by linking the part in the scripts here where we actually do our build step,
Mm-hmm.
I think it's possible that theoretically, if they're vendored, we may not need to actually include these three libraries at all.
Okay, I see what you mean. No, I have not yet done that. Maybe I should try that and get back to you guys. I was assuming I needed these because,
I was too.
I, yeah,
So
yeah, okay. I think
besides
Yeah.
the
it's
libsodium, obviously.
And just to
right.
look at those export flags there, and we can try understand what they're doing. So like all the build RS scripts, right? So that's the build scripts attached to each dependency that we compile if they have a build RS script. Most of them, as their sort of default convention, will check for these environment arguments when they start building, right? So like
Mhm.
sodium libdir, sodium static, things like that. Um, yeah, so that you can see we have a build RS for the unify here. But it's the build RS of the actual dependencies that might be checking for
So what might be
those
useful
environment
is
flags.
go into code actually, and I can do a
Open
search
up the link.
for.
Well, it'd be like in the build RS script of, say, the Rust ZMQ.
The
Um,
zip file, right? You mean George? Like the actual
um,
files that it downloads.
like no, it'd be like in the ZMQ Rust crate, for instance,
Okay.
would have somewhere in the build script that says check for the
Oh, check for these
libzmq.
environment variables. We're not using this within our project that's
Yes,
being
exactly.
consumed elsewhere.
Exactly. Yeah, we're setting it for the sake of these dependencies build scripts to use.
Mm,
So when it tries to build, if we supply these correct arguments, it knows where to look when it links. And then I
yep.
think see how it's like sodium underscore static, OpenSSL static. I think what the static is doing is it's telling these build scripts, link
That
it,
it's being statically linked rather than.
yeah, also
Uh,
embedded in the binary. So it's interesting that libzmq isn't in this isn't in this underscore static list, which is also interesting because then I remember building this project. I think it also copies over the libzmq so file into the Android demo, which it probably has to do because there's no libzmq underscore static equals one here. So
Yeah.
it's not statically linked. So therefore, you have to put the binary alongside the main binary.
Hmm.
Mm,
Okay. I need to double check that. Yeah, I think you're right. If I recall correctly, that's what it's moving into the mobile demo.
And I
Okay.
think we would prefer for it to be statically linked, right? Because that is the easiest consumption from the mobile development point of view, right?
yeah, it definitely simplifies things. Yeah, so yeah, just so I was just thinking about those environment variables back, but
Uh-huh.
back to where we were. I think it's probably a matter of trying to remove all of this stuff and see what we actually
Need.
absolutely need. Yeah.
Uh, I think that's
Oh,
really smart because I think that you're um I think you're correct about vendor. Like that's why it's there. I think I approached that from the opposite point of view, which is not ideal. So I think I would start with removing anything related to OpenSSL and libzmq and entirely libsodium because we aren't using it. And then see where it breaks and see what we have and slowly add things back to try and fix issues that we
mhm.
run into with it. That seems like a good approach to me.
Yeah, yeah, I like that better. Yeah, so this way I can actually dig into more like how this is all compiled and working together.
Yep.
Instead of just kind of attacking it through this way. Okay.
Yep.
Just to go further on it, I sent 3 links in the Zoom, and I think it'll
Okay.
be helpful if we look through them in order, if that's all right.
Yeah. Is this okay? Gotcha. Yeah.
Yeah, so as James was saying, the CL signatures RS dependency has that dependency on OpenSSL. And so then you can see the CL signatures crate. Um, yeah, it has feature flags in here which specify whether you want to vendor the dependency or not. So see how it's like a opt-in to SSL vendor.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So that means if you compile a non-cred CL signatures RS with the OpenSSL vendor flag on, then it will automatically embed the OpenSSL binary for you into your binary.
Okay.
Right. So that's a feature flag of the CL signatures.
Which we're
Or
not
not,
specifying,
not
which would
really
mean
there.
that it would need to be, we would need to provide it because we're not vendoring it presently.
I think
That
so.
seem
Yeah,
accurate?
I think so.
So what you guys are saying, if this breaks, I probably need to provide it that way.
Hmm. Um, yeah, I think so. But
Okay.
I
James,
think we want to add an additional to these. We want to add the features is
Rendered.
OpenSSL vendored.
yeah, yeah,
Yeah, and this might blow things up. That is the that is a distinct possibility.
yeah. And it is interesting whether it should be vended by default or not, or it's something that we should have feature flags to opt into. Because,
As
for
well.
instance, when you run this on your Mac, you already have, or on your Windows machine or Linux machine, you already have those dependencies installed. You don't need them vended really. Um,
Mm.
so it is wasted binary space, I guess, but is what it is. But
What
if you
might
go
be
back,
useful is if we start if we can get it to work as vendored, then we could walk Aries-vcx backwards to add feature flags to also allow us to have it be vendored. So if we could get it to work this way, we can do more work to make it so that it's optional from the Aries-vcx standpoint
hmm, yeah, yeah, that makes sense.
Okay.
Yeah. If you go up a level as well, James, to the second link I sent, and hopefully this
Mm.
explains some of the things we're seeing. So like this is the non-creds RS crate, which is what consumes the CL signatures. And you can see even this crate has the vendor feature as well, which is something you have to opt into. And when you opt into it, that notation there means that we're by turning on this flag, you're turning on this transient dependency flag, the OpenSSL vended, right?
Yep.
So I think our consumption of non-creds RS would also have to have this vended flag to
Yep.
make sure we're enabling it across the board.
Yep.
And then finally, in that last link I sent, so yeah, we were looking at the build. I would recommend looking at the build dash XC framework sh
Yeah.
Alberto,
Yeah.
uh, and that's the script that the build universal sh script. I think that's just for building it for Mac. So you build it for an Intel and an Apple ARM chip, whereas the
Okay.
XC framework is focused about building it for the iOS architectures. And that build XC framework sh script is used by this pipeline here, right? So this is the non-creds workflow pipeline, and it's a multi-step thing. So I think the first thing it does is it will build it out for all the iOS architectures, which is line 429. And you can see
Okay.
they're
Yeah.
enabling the vended flag there. So they're
Okay.
essentially, by putting that flag there, they're embedding OpenSSL uh, into the non-creds binary.
Mm,
And then after that, they call on to the create iOS XC framework, which depends on those binaries being built first.
gotcha. What is this
Mm.
gonna export ultimately? Oh, I see. Okay, no, I
Um,
see.
yeah,
Yeah.
you end up with the XC framework,
Right. Right. Okay, gotcha.
which is, yeah, I think that's what you want to end up with.
Yeah.
Previously, like on indie pipelines, you'd end up with a dot framework, which was
Yeah.
fine at the time because there wasn't really Intel, I mean, there wasn't ARM silicon Mac chips. Sorry, what am I trying to say here? There wasn't simulator iOS ARM architecture. There was
Right.
only Intel simulator iOS and the
Yeah.
actual real iOS. So there's only
Right.
two, but now there's three architectures, and
Yeah.
it just makes more sense to build it into an XC framework to get all of those binaries in there.
Perfect. This makes total
Mm,
sense now. I think this is a good way to some guide for me at least.
mm.
I think
Thanks.
these links are really good.
Yeah, it's worth seeing how they're actually building it because we know that they're building it and people are consuming it and it's working. So what are
Yep.
they doing that we're not doing?
Right. Exactly.
Hmm.
Awesome.
Very good. I'll grab these and put them in the. Ugh. Put 'em here in the notes. Well, that's the formatting there is hilariously not happy. It doesn't really matter. Um, yeah, I think that gives you a good direction, Alberto. Any other um, commentary on that topic?
Not at the moment. I guess I'll follow up through Discord. Just let you know, guys know how it went.
Sweet.
Cool.
Awesome.
Yeah, sounds
Thank
good.
you.
I think one more thing, and we'll come to it when we come to it. But if we find that we do have to, download these dependencies and build them in, or manually link them in,
Mhm.
then we need to sort of make a decision about where we pull them from
Yep.
and where they are, whether they should be, binaries that are embedded in our repo so that we're always using the same thing, or whether we should keep using, sovereign repo to download dependencies,
I
which,
Mhm.
think if we end up needing to download the dependencies, I think we should either do that directly from like the source, so like directly from a ZMQ, for instance, distribution, or that should go into the like if we're talking about ZMQ, that should go as a distribution from the NDVDR standpoint. Like I don't think Aries-vcx should be distributing having binaries for those held here, if that makes sense.
Yep. Yep.
And sovereign is I don't think we want to rely on that as the place for the packages at this point either.
Yep. Yeah, that's sort of a legacy thing that's been passed around through build scripts over generations of indie and everything else, I think.
Yes. Very good note. Sweet. Aries Framework VCX. So I wanted to give a brief look at what I've been doing here and get feedback on it. First thing I'll note is the name. Specifically, I know this is a little bit named differently from what Patrick was proposing, but my thought process here being is I wanted to create a framework, so an Aries framework. And why not call it Aries Framework Rust is that I want this to be inclusive of every platform that you can get on top of Rust as well. So I thought it would be appropriate to do Aries Framework and then not just the language, but our project name VCX. So, and I had thought about doing Aries-vcx Framework, but whenever I try to talk about it, I end up saying Aries Framework VCX instead because that may be because the other Aries projects that are frameworks also are Aries Framework, etc. So that was my thought for the name.
Yeah, makes sense.
Cool.
Cool.
Let's see. So what this is my second iteration through. What I've done here is I have a separate repo right now just so I didn't have to keep updating based off of changes to Aries-vcx main just for the first short little bit, and then I plan on getting this integrated in Aries-vcx. But what I've done so far is I've created a Aries Framework VCX crate and then a sample framework agent crate. I think that the sample framework agent would either end up replacing the existing Aries VCX agent or would go alongside it and we'd deprecate this. I'm not sure what the transition there looks like, but I don't know that we need both of them. Or we'll end up updating this one to use the new framework. Moral of the story is I wanted to have a sample agent that I could test against the framework to demonstrate its capabilities and consume it to a degree, you know?
Yeah, makes sense.
So I think what would probably make sense is to do a quick run through of or a quick run of the code. Oh, I forgot. I'm pointing to this locally, so it is not happy with the the vendor I did here. So what I'm doing right now is just initializing the framework and then attempting to create an out of band invitation. So I haven't even gotten to like the next step for me is to do a connection and then from there actually is probably to do a mediated connection because then we have all the building blocks of persistence and message sending and connection so we can do other protocols and whatnot as well. But for now, what this essentially does is initializes the framework, does a bunch of ASCAR stuff under the hood, create the out of band invitation, more ASCAR. It will do some of the DID exchange state machine, doing some of the DID peer generation. And we'll actually create the out of band invitation. And then I've set up what I think I have found to be an elegant event emitting strategy within Rust. Because after doing a decent amount of research here, you can create an observable model, but you end up running into some interesting uh, if for instance, observer the observable goes out of scope, does the observer die with it? Does it like there are some interesting problems there, and what I ended up using was a um, I forget the name of it. I ended up using a
like a channel.
yeah, a channel
Yeah.
specifically because that way you can actually you're sending one type of one type across from a sender to a receiver,
Mm.
and um, it works actually really elegantly in that you'll error out if the uh, sender disappears, and yeah, I still need to do the error handling around this. I've left comments on the event, specifically right here, for instance, add appropriate error handling here, but it does allow us to do cleanly allow us to have a event emission uh, within the framework.
Mm.
That gets slightly into the weeds, but we can see that that's what happened with the logs is that we were able to produce a out of band invitation running through what the consumer looks like. The thought process being is that we specify a framework config. The majority thing here right now is the wallet config. um, I've defined some helpful defaults here for uh, initially getting started with the framework. You would provide an agent endpoint. So then you do an initialize on this, and the framework itself contains services. So if I want to go ahead and, in this case, I'm going to register for any events on the out of band service. Um, and I'm putting this into a separate thread. So because it's thread safe, I wanted I wanted to make that happen.
Mm.
So you can end up handling any events that come from the framework in whatever means that the consumer wants to, which is really nice, whether it be in a separate thread or it be within a class they create, etc. It's a fairly ubiquitous what they want to do with it. And this is an example of using the out of band service to create an invitation. I did not handle the errors here. But the thought process here is what I'm aiming for is to be a simple and easy to use layer in between what Aries-vcx is right now and add on the pieces that it's missing. For instance, the event handling or the
Mm.
event emitting, so that we can have a uh, that doesn't have to be written by the consumer side of things.
Yeah, yeah, very cool. Cool. So that create invitation has something that triggers the sender of that
Yeah.
event.
So we can look at that so the out of band service has obviously the new and sets that up, but the create invitation, this is um, very this is creating the pure did
Mm.
and then calling the out of band sender as you said, and just returns
Cool.
that. Well, this also emits the event, and this to do here indicates like this is where we would also persist that invitation. Um, uh, and so, for instance, if this was rather than a create invitation, a send request for like the connection process, this would also trigger the sending of that request. Is the current thought process that I have, at least.
Yep. Yeah, that's cool. Yeah, makes sense. Could I see the self.send event again? Ah, cool. Yeah, 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 makes sense.
Awesome.
Cool.
Yeah. Uh, the
Awesome.
the
I see the
framework
vision.
is, yeah. That's it. This is my like second iteration of trying to make this a little bit provide a good foundation to build from on this.
Mhm.
And so I think that's the majority of what I wanted to show today. Does this seem like a good direction, or you're like there's a couple of red flags that you see that you want to point out?
Um, no, I don't really see anything wrong with it. Yeah, it makes sense. Like, I suppose, yeah, what's VCX missing? It's missing persistence, it's missing events, it's missing like automatically receiving and processing messages.
Hmm.
Which, yeah, have you thought about that? Whether you like want to embed a mediated client or something like that?
Yes, I think the thought process is that it is. I want to try and make it as pluggable as possible, but it is integral to be able to create like my thought process right now. So this could change some, but similar to what the approach was in AFJ was to create a mediator module. So in this context, this would be like creating a mediation service that handles like what your default mediator is and returns the routing keys for that. And when you need to add a do like a key list update so that you can actually create a new connection, it will handle that for you and try and be a abstract front so that you can have the connections module use the mediation module, um, and it works from uh, it is somewhat abstracted away. We could even go a little bit further there if we want to and have that be a generic trait, so we could have multiple implementations of for the mediator service, if you will. But
Hmm.
that might be a step two. uh, but yes, I think that we need to be able to have that. Uh, we need to be able to be the recipient, the client of the mediator, for sure.
Yeah, 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 very cool. Do you sort of have a sort of philosophy in mind of how high or low level the framework's APIs should be? Like, are we going for like a Akapi level and AFJ level? Um, like I saw your create invitation function. Should we let consumers pass in additional configuration for like, what handshake protocols, things like that? Or is that getting too low level?
No, I think that my philosophy, at least, is that, and so this is up for debate, obviously, but my philosophy is that providing additional complexity is okay as long as you can have the simple and or you have defaults, meaning uh, w- for like create invitation, for instance, what this should probably actually indicate is have a optional field for the um, or a optional or a default for the handshake protocol so that a user can just do create invitation and it'll do did exchange by default. But if they want to be specific and they want to use a different handshake protocol, they can, but it is not required by default. Similar thought process can be also defined via the uh, uh, framework config. So for instance, one of the ones that we had in AFJ in the framework config that could make a lot of sense in some use cases is to say, I want to automate, I want to accept every connection request I get. As long
Mm,
as I and there was varying levels in AFJ actually as well, or Credo at this point, that was like, we want to accept every request, no matter what. And then there was another level that was like, hey, if we, for instance, in reference to credential issuance, if the user has accepted this once, we want to automate the process all the way through unless they have changed some of the attributes, for instance.
Yeah.
That's some of the stuff that I think can go into the config is a really good place for it as well. So
Yeah.
that's a long answer to say is yes, I think that there can and should be complexity here. But I think, and I think I think that there should be. I think that what I want to make sure, though, first and foremost, is that it is easy to use, and that um, changing a config isn't too hard. Having to figure out how to mediate your messages with a mediator, that's really hard to do. So I want to simplify, but I don't also want to hamstring use cases where they need additional configuration, complexity, and whatnot.
Yeah. Awesome. Yeah, you're definitely the right person for this task with all the AFJ experience. Yeah, that's awesome.
Awesome. Good question.
Um,
Um,
go
sorry,
ahead.
just a quick
Oh,
thing. One thing you should try play with is we're using like the standard lib channels for your event subscriptions.
Hmm.
You should try the Tokyo async channels to see if that can fit in.
I should take a look at that. I think that I, I had looked at the documentation there a little bit, but I didn't go too deep in. What do you think would be the value of the async channels over what's provided by the standard library?
I suppose so. We're already sort of leaning into async, right? These aren't
Yep.
blocking functions, they're async. They aren't going to stop a thread. When you do things like the dot receive on those channels, it will block the thread, which
Hmm.
is arguably fine because you are spawning a thread there. Um, but I
If you want to
suppose
continue work in the background, for instance.
yeah, like if it was async instead, then dot receive would return a future which you can await on, and instead of spawning a thread where you spawned it in the sample framework, you would essentially like spawn a async task, um, and then the async runtime can coordinate all that.
Mm,
So it could still run on like a single threaded environment if that's desirable. There's probably
mhm.
a whole bunch of other issues with trying to do that, but yeah.
I think that could be valuable. I think that I will admit that my Rust experience there is where uh I I suspect that as I continue to try and use and develop the framework, I will run into spots where I'm like, this will be really good to have that specifically. uh I think that makes sense. And I guess one thought is, do you think that is something that um do you think my current thought process would be to continue with what the standard library provides until we slash I find specifically find the downfall or slash the need for the async what's provided by Tokyo. Does that seem like a decent approach, or should I just try and go with what Tokyo is providing initially right off the bat, do you think?
I think that's reasonable. I'm not overly concerned with it right now, and I can't really think of a reason to be overly concerned at this point in time. Yeah.
I guess what I'll say is I'll take a look at it, but I but yeah, I'll take a look at it. It's a good recommendation. So
No, good. Cool.
Alberto, I think you had a comment as well.
Oh, yeah, I was just going to ask. I mean, first of all, this looks great. As you mentioned, you already showed this to us the other day.
Hmm.
So congrats. I guess the question I wanted to ask now was, what's going to be in your third iteration? What are you expecting to accomplish and sort of the next steps?
Yeah. Next steps to me, I think, is to uh, I want to be able to, like, my goal milestone for the next thing here is to be able to connect to another agent. That involves the creation of the other uh, connection messages. So did exchange and be able to consume an invitation, for instance. Um, that's not too far beyond what I've already done. The part that is going to require is one, persistence, and then two is also going to require the um, transports. So outbound and inbound transports. So I'm likely to try and start with the transports because I think that's going to be simpler because I could just do HTTP initially. Um, and then uh, persistence, I think uh, we're going to rely on the ASCAR. Well, I guess it's not the ASCAR specific, the wallet. Uh, the wallet itself has a record wallet. So going to rely on, I think at least this to a degree, we're going to need to put an additional trait and structure on top of it, I think, to be more specific for the framework. But I think that's the plan at the moment is to use this for the persistence. So that's my present plan. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, definitely. Cool. Looking forward.
Awesome. Sweet.
Hey,
Uh,
James,
yeah,
just a general Aries question, and
yep.
yeah, just to discuss. Um, so yeah, like I think Credo, definitely Akapai will like persistently store protocol states and artifacts in
Mhm.
as car wallets previously, like indie wallets, right? As
Yep.
records. Do you know why everyone does that? Like as opposed to, just storing these records in some normal SQL database. And
Yep.
for the sake of this, let's say it's an encrypted SQL database, encrypted at rest.
Yep. Because if you do your own SQL database and it's encrypted at rest, you remove the security concern there. Theoretically, if you've done it well, that there's no longer a reason that you need to use the ASCAR wallet for that, for
Mm,
the security need, right? Um,
mm,
so from I what I would from my understanding, and so this may be missing some historical context, especially like with Akapai, where I wasn't involved in decisions there. Um, I would think that one of the big reasons in my mind is if you can put it into the ASCAR wallet, that also has the functionality for the import export of that wallet. So
mm,
you can import it into another location. You have a single export. It hasn't gotten to this point yet, but if we can define the uh, a universal format for import and export, that also means there's interoperability between wallets and frameworks and whatnot. So you can import and export from one wallet. That's one of the things I could see being a value there.
mm,
I I could also see it just being a simplicity thing of like we already have a wallet or a database that is secure and can work for us, so why not throw everything else in there too?
mm. Yeah. Yeah, yeah, that makes sense. I'm forgetting as well about, WQL, the wallet query language. I think that's sort of a free feature you get. You don't have to worry about creating
Yep.
your own SQL indexes and stuff.
Yep. I think it's interesting also though, because I think that could be worth additional discussion in that, like, Akapi, for instance, theoretically indicates that, and because by default, if I recall, it does not persist long-term the protocol messages and whatnot.
Mm,
It says, hey, that's supposed to be up to the controller to persist and handle.
mm,
Uh, in practice, everybody that I've worked with, at least, has persisted that within Akapi with flags past Akapi. So whether or not that's actually been realized or not, I'm not sure. Um, but I think that points to, even though that's how it's been traditionally done, that may not be, that doesn't mean that's the way we have to do it. So I
mm,
think that um, it could potentially be valuable for us to, as we're doing the framework here actually, and we build the persistence layer, doing a trait that can, or one option is for us to do a trait, a interface that can allow us to use the Askar wallet, or we can do other storage implementations if we want. That could be of benefit potentially.
mm. Yep. Yeah, agreed. Yeah, at Anonymly, we usually call them like repositories. You'd have like a repository trait. Um,
Mm,
I'm not sure if that's like a globally used term, but
I think I've
yeah,
heard that some.
yeah, and then yeah, different implementations for different types of database. Yeah, yeah, cool. Because yeah, I
It's a
think
good point.
one thing I'm unsure about with ASCAR and indie wallets from my experience is like support for sorting and pagination over those sorted lists, and even just like querying and hoping that it maintains the same order. I'm not sure
Hmm.
if it does that. Um,
Um,
yeah.
those are specifics I'm not as familiar with. I do believe that the for instance, like the wallet query language that at least applied in the Indie SDK land is limited in
Mm,
that uh, you could only sort by tags, at least when it came to the Indie SDK, um, which means that you like couldn't search by content and whatnot.
mm,
Um, so it was definitely limiting versus potentially a traditional database. Like, uh, so what AskCart does, I am less familiar with. There might be more flexibility there. Um, but I know that was a restriction when it came to Indie SDK. I do know that Indie SDK did do pagination though.
yeah, would do pagination. Yeah, yeah,
Oh, but what order, I guess, I do
yeah,
not remember if that was consistent or not.
yeah. Yeah. Yeah, I guess I don't know, starting to think about since we're starting a new thing, whether we do have to use it or not, or whether we want to use ASCAR as like the exchange entity storage. Definitely still need it for, you know, credentials or crypto keys,
Yep.
which we're already doing. Um, yeah. But whether we need to use it for, yeah, the persistent layer.
I think
I
it's a
suppose, yeah, it's something to keep in mind. Like, I imagine you'll design like a connections service or something to sit alongside that out of band service, and
mhm.
some of the APIs on that might be like list related. And I suppose you'll need to decide like what listing functionality you want, whether you want sorting by certain things like, created timestamp and whether it should be paginated. And then I suppose depending on those API requirements, you could decide whether ASCAR is capable of the functionality you need.
Yep. I
Mm,
think that from the AFJ perspective, I believe that we did not care about the order in which things were returned. We would just return them in whatever order we like they came out of IndySDK. So like there wasn't a that was not within our we did not it was not a concern to us, if that makes sense. That doesn't mean that it shouldn't be a concern to us here. It just wasn't with in that context. And similarly, AFJ/Credo did not, at least when I was working with it heavily, was not doing pagination. We would fetch the entire list and then return that. We weren't working in contexts where you would have enough, for instance, credentials where that was a problem. This is according to my memory. So we would just fetch the whole thing, which isn't ideal. And I want to say that's because AFJ/Credo was being most heavily used as a holder perspective rather than an issuer. An issuer could issue hundreds of millions of credentials, while a holder is likely to have maximum, at least at this point in time, like 10, which is actually a high number for a user.
Yeah, definitely.
So, but I think those are things that are wise to consider. I think fortunately that those are things that if we don't have to get perfect on the first try either, and that it's things that we can adjust to our API of like, oh, we need to be more severe about our pagination or adjust our defaults or whatnot. It's not something that'll utterly break our APIs, if you will. And if they do, like, I think one of the related questions here is how soon do we offer migration support? So that's something that AFJ/Credo does, is it offers migration between versions. So if we do changes to the how and what we persist, offering migration between those is an involved process, but is also really good from a consumer standpoint. And I think, from my opinion, is probably immediately after first release.
Yeah. Well, we're gonna get it correct first try, right? And there's gonna be no migration ever.
Exactly.
Yeah, no,
These are
makes
really
sense.
good questions, George. But I noticed that you got me talking and we're a little past time now. So I think it's a really good discussion today, and been some really good work, and looking forward to what happens in the next 2 weeks here. And we'll definitely at least talk to you at the next call, if not sooner.
Yeah, sounds good. Yeah, thanks for the chat, guys, and keep in touch.
Thanks,
Thank
George,
you.
for all the tips. James, thanks for organizing this. Awesome.
Yep.
Cool.
All right. See you.
All right.
All right. Thank you, guys. Bye.
Bye.